Well, good morning and welcome to Catalyst. My name is Dave. I'm one of the pastors here. And whether you join us in person or online, I want to thank you for being here. We're continuing in our series called Grace Marriage. And we're talking about today about the probably one of the most sensitive ones, which is grace parenting. Now, not everybody here is a parent. Not everybody joining us online is a parent, but everyone has been a child. And everyone has parents. And so I want to invite you guys to reflect on that as we are talking about this. But grace parenting is going to be one of the most important things that we do. All right, so like Rob said, the main thing today is in grace parenting, we are more concerned with breaking relationship than breaking rules, okay? The fifth commandment that we see in the Bible is honor your father and your mother, that it may go well with you. And a lot of us just kind of stop there. We think, okay, honor father and mother, what does that mean? And a lot of us ask, well, what if they aren't honorable? That's where we go. But I believe the fifth commandment has something greater to say to us. What if, and I want to just kind of dream for a little bit, what if our homes were honor-based? What if there was honor in our homes? Not just for parents, but for kids, for uncles, aunts, for people that came in. What if we had honor-based homes? What would it look like? And that's something to think about. We kind of miss this. See, a lot of us, we have homes that are not honor-based. A lot of us as parents, there are different types of parent. We parent for different reasons. The first one is basically kind of what I call guilt parenting. Guilt parenting. Guilt parenting, basically the parents look at the kid and say, well, I owe you. I've done something. Maybe I'm not the greatest parent in the world. I'm not the nicest person. Maybe a divorce, or maybe I've done something wrong, and I just owe my kids. And so I spend my whole time running around trying to make it up to them. I can't discipline because after all, they messed up. Well, it's probably my fault anyway. They're that way. So I can't really discipline. I can't really punish because it's pretty much my fault anyway. The guilt parent says, I owe you. The second type is what basically fear parenting. Fear. There's basically this parent says it's just not safe out there. There's a lot of bad stuff out there, a lot of ways you can get hurt, a lot of ways you can be led astray. So we're just going to basically parent out of fear. We're going to circle the wagons. We're going to keep our kids away from every bad influence and steer away from the world. Well, there is something to that we are called to protect our kids and everything like that. But fear-based parenting is not biblical. We're not supposed to live in fear. The third type of parenting I see is I just call it performance parenting. And this is where you got an image to maintain. You got to achieve. We've got a certain family standard that you've got to live up to. And it's basically performance parenting. We parents withhold love based on how well you do in school, or whether or not you make this choice or that choice, or if you date this person or that person that they deem worthy. Performance parenting, performance parenting basically says maintain the image. We maintain the image. And the fourth type is just crisis parenting. Crisis parenting, it seems like the parents only show up when there's a crisis. You don't see them unless there's some type of wrong thing going on. They're like the 911 operators. They fly from crisis to crisis to crisis, but they never ever parent. They're always in response mode. Well, see, the Bible has a different vision for our homes. See, that's why you guys are here this morning. That's why you're joining us online, is because you are wanting a different vision. The purpose of preaching is to provide a different vision, an alternative vision, a better vision for how things can be in our homes. That's the purpose of preaching, and that's the purpose of here. Okay, that's why you're here. See, the Bible doesn't want guilt parenting, doesn't want fear-based parenting, doesn't want performance parenting, doesn't want crisis parenting. The Bible wants grace parenting. Okay, so the first thing we have to understand is, what is grace? What is grace? If we don't understand what grace is, there's no way we can parent that way, no way we can live that way. Well, Colossians 3:21 says this: fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. Okay? When people think of grace, a lot of people think permissive. You know, a grace period, you kind of got a stay of execution. It's permissive. Very, very, very wrong thinking about it that way. Dr. Tim Kimmel, in his book, Grace-Based Parenting, identifies the three needs that all children have. Number one is a need for security. A need for security. The kids have to know that things are secure. All right? Second, they have a need for significance. All people have a need for significance. And the third is a need for strength. All right? And he writes this: the way to meet all these needs is by giving your children three valuable gifts: love, purpose, and hope. And if we've done our job adequately, our children should leave our homes with a love that is secure, a purpose that is significant, and a hope that is strong. I highly recommend that book. But there's nothing permissive about any of that, okay? There's nothing permissive about that. Grace doesn't mean you just overlook your kids' faults and problems. That's not what a good parent does. It means you parent your children the way God parents us. God is not permissive, nor is he legalistic and threatening. But here's something that I run into all the time when I'm counseling parents. And having been a parent for 21 years and dealing with everything, I get it. I really do. But this is something that we just get wrong about authority. What we get wrong about authority. I want to bring you guys to Matthew chapter 7, 24 through 29. And parents and kids, you need to listen to this. All right? Jesus says this: therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice, like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Verse 28, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority. Everybody say authority. Authority, not as their teachers of the law. Okay, so we understand something going on here, and you do this too. There are people in our lives that we perceive as having legitimate authority, and people that we say have illegitimate authority. There are people that if we believe them to have legitimate authority, we will do what they say. We will honor them. But if we believe them to be illegitimate in authority, we don't have anything to do with them. Okay? In Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, he gave the scenario of what happened in the 1970s in Ireland. That was when there were the deal between the Protestants and the Catholics, and they hated each other, and they were killing each other in Northern Ireland and all this kind of thing. Anybody old enough to remember those days? Yeah, you know that in one time a Protestant pastor stood up and said, an atheist in Northern Ireland stood up and said, I don't believe in God. And a woman in the back said, well, is it the God of the Catholics or Protestants you don't believe in? Anyway. That happened back then. But what happened was the English saw there was all this unrest and riots going on. And so they sent in the military. The prevailing thought of the time, you guys, was that if you punish severely enough, people will stop. If they were to go in and just crack down, the people would say, this is just not worth it. It's not worth it to rebel. It's not worth it to fight, because I'm not going to jail for life, or I'm not this kind of. That was the prevailing mindset. So the English military went into Northern Ireland, and they instituted martial law. They cracked down. They rounded up the leaders, and they showed no mercy, and they just arrested, and they went house to house and dragged people out and this kind of thing. Well, a strange thing happened. The tougher they cracked down, the more resistance they got. And the English, the more that they cracked down, the more violence there was. And that caused some head scratching among the high command. What is going on here? We're punishing more severely, but we're seeing more and more resistance. Every time we take one of these guys off the street, 10 more pop up. What's going on? Well, what was going on was this perception of illegitimate authority. And unfortunately, parents, Our children are exactly like us. And if they perceive us to be illegitimately in authority in the house, we're going to have an all-out rebellion on our hands. We have to understand this. The whole thing of I'm the mom or I'm the dad and that's enough doesn't work. It doesn't work in your life. It doesn't work in your, that's not how you work. You don't follow someone's title. You follow what you perceive to be legitimate authority. And so this is how we distinguish between legitimate authority and illegitimate authority, and we have to understand this as parents. Also, kids, you need to understand this too. There are three things. It's not in your outline, but there are three things. The first thing is we look for consistency. If we're going to see something as legitimate authority, we look for consistency. Interestingly enough, this is one of the frustrating things. This is why we're having such a troubled time with the COVID-19 pandemic, is that there is a remarkable lack of consistency in our leaders in applying laws. We see the mandate to wear a mask, and then we see the same people mandating that without them on. We see people saying you can't go to church, but you can go to a protest. You can't go to go to a funeral, but you can go to Walmart. There's a lack of consistency, and that is what has promoted all of the resistance to it. So that also has to happen in your home. Parents, if there is no consistency in the application of rules, the application of what is right and wrong, you will be very, very, very quickly seen as illegitimate in your home. Your children are looking for consistency in how you are. If you say, child, mom, son, daughter, don't talk back to your mom that way. Yeah, Dad, we heard what you called her the other day when y'all were arguing. Inconsistency. Second thing we look for motive. Well, the first thing we look for consistency in deciding, we look for motive. Why are they doing what they are doing? Do they have my best interests at heart? That's another problem with authority. The Pharisees, back in Jesus' day, the people quickly discerned that they did not have their best interests at heart. They were out for themselves, and that's why they made such a contrast between Jesus and the Pharisees. They saw Jesus acting in their best interest, and the Pharisees acting in their own best interest, okay? So motive is the second thing. Why are we telling our kids to do this? Why are we doing what we're doing, okay? That is a way to be seen as legitimate authority. The third thing is always we look for love. Does my dad, does my mom have my back? Are they there? Do they truly care about me? Okay? Those are three things that if you want to be seen as a legitimate authority in your home, you have to have consistency, you have to have the right motives, and you have to have love. Our children, believe me, pick that up very quickly. Just like you do, parents. You understand that because that's the way you work too, okay? So what we get wrong about authority, it's not the crackdown. It's that you have to be seen as legitimate in your home. And if you are not seen as legitimate in your home, your children will show it very, very quickly. Okay, so these are three things that we have to work on: becoming more consistent, having the right motives, and having love. People that are seen as consistent, have the right motives, and are loving are going to be followed. Their word is going to be followed. They're going to be respected as legitimate authority, okay? So this is that we have to understand that when we talk about grace-based parenting. The third thing I want to tell you is that the word discipline pops up all the time in parenting. I know that because I was a subject of quite a bit of discipline in my lifetime, okay? But the word discipline means to teach. I always thought discipline meant punishment, because every time I faced disciplinary action, I got punished. And it happened a lot, okay? And I always thought that it meant to punish, but it doesn't. The grace-based parent understands that the word discipline comes from the Latin word discipulus, which we get disciple from. This was, when I realized this was groundbreaking for me, that I am in a teacher-disciple relationship with my kids. I'm not the enforcer, I'm not the police. I am their teacher, they are my disciple. Like Jesus had the 12 disciples. The word discipline means to teach. Hebrews 12:11 says this, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. I want you to underline something. I want you to underline harvest of righteousness and peace, because we're going to come back to that. Harvest of righteousness, and underline that in the Bible, highlight it on your YouVersion Bible, whatever. This is very significant. See, grace-based parents view everything as an opportunity to teach. Okay? Understand that. I really have to emphasize this. Grace-based parents always focus on the lesson, not on the infraction. How many of us, when we were kids, think about you. If you are a kid, think about like last week. If you are an adult, when you were kids, how many of you, when you got into trouble, learned the wrong lesson? I did. I learned the wrong lesson. When I teach parenting classes down at the jail, one of the questions we ask is, what is the worst trouble you ever got into as a kid? Oh, I hear some good ones. There's some really, really good ones. For me, when I was in the first grade, I didn't see any need to do any work at school. I didn't like doing schoolwork. I didn't want to do schoolwork. And when the teacher passed out the dittos, how many of y'all remember dittos? Okay, right now you can smell the ditto, can't you? You know exactly, you're doing that right now, because the first thing every kid did when the teacher passed out dittos was, okay, how many of y'all can smell it right now? Absolutely, okay. All right, for those of you that did not have the wonderful scent of ditto in your face, it was a little printed out sheet, and you filled in your work. Well, the system we had in first grade, the teacher would hand out the dittos, and we would do them, and when you were done, you put your work in the box, and you went to the player, you got to play. Well, see, I wanted to go play, and I didn't see the need. I was more efficient. I was going to skip the work part, okay? I was just going to, and it was crafty. I was 6 years old, and I realized that, I'll just wait here. I'll not do anything, and I'll wait for the first person, and then and when that first person goes over there, I'll just go over there too. It was a great thing. Everybody won. I didn't do the work. I got to play. It was great. Well, the problem is that I was getting zeros on all the work, and like a genius, I left the dittos in my desk. So I will never forget the time where my teacher called me up and said, I've got zeros for you the last 2 weeks. And I said, well, I turned it in. Brilliant. She goes, we'll see about that. She walks over to my desk, opens up the desk, and there's every one of them sitting right there. The class took a collective breath, and all of a sudden they started laughing. It was awful. Teacher called my mom. It wasn't pretty when I got home. Then it was even less pretty when my dad got home. See, that was the problem. I always got in trouble 3 times for every one thing I did. I got in trouble at school, then I got in trouble when I got home from mom, and then I got even worse when dad got home. So it was like God was stacking the punishments up, okay? And when I share that, how many of y'all have experienced getting in trouble? All of us have. Well, what lesson did I learn? Well, I learned some pretty good ones. First of all, I learned not to lie, because lying got me in a lot of trouble. It wasn't the work that upset my parents and my teachers. The fact that I lied, that I had such a lack of character that I would look at them and lie. I realized I learned that really hurt people. That was bad. It was really bad. I learned that lesson. And I learned it's a lot less work just to do your work. I learned what it was like to look like an idiot in front of the class. Fortunately, I learned the right lessons, you all. But what lessons have you learned? When I talk to many people about their parents growing up, many times all they told me, the lesson they learned was don't get caught. So instead of learning what was right, they just got better at doing what was wrong. See, when rules-oriented parents, non-grace-based parents punish, they actually create simply better criminals. They create children that are better at skirting the system. They create kids that just are more slick, more crafty. They're inadvertently making better criminals because their children are learning the wrong lesson. All they're learning is how not to get caught. And guys, if that is what we are producing in our homes, we have got to stop that. Because sooner or later, your child is going to reach someone, work for someone, whatever, that won't teach them, that won't allow them to get better at being a better criminal. They're going to get busted. All right? Remember what Hebrews 12:11 says. Parents, what are you teaching? If we truly teach discipline and teach the right things, it says the purpose of discipline is to produce a harvest of righteousness. A harvest, something that's growing up in your children. Righteousness, honesty, integrity, faith, joy, love. These things are the things that are supposed to be growing like a harvest in our children. And look what it says. When that harvest is there, it leads to peace in the home. How many of you all would love to have a little bit of peace in the home? Absolutely. When we discipline, when we truly teach our children the right things and produces a harvest of righteousness, the Bible says that leads to peace. Don't miss that. All right? So as we move grace into the home, it's just something we have to understand. We need to move the grace of God into our homes. The first thing that has to happen, though, parents, you have to understand the grace of God for yourself. You cannot be a grace-based parent if you are not a grace-based Christian. Okay? If you do not understand the grace of God for yourself, you will not be able to send it to your children. Romans 6:14 says this, "For sin shall no longer be your master because you are not under law but under grace." So I'm going to ask the parents, do you understand the grace of God? Many of us still have a performance view of the faith. We really do. If I was to ask honest question, how many of you all still think that it is your job to earn your way into God's favor? If we were honest, more than half of the people in this room and online would say yes. How do I know that? Because a study came out last week. It said that more than 50% of American Christians say that Jesus Christ's death on the cross and resurrection is not necessary for salvation. It is being a good person. Okay? Grace means, on the contrary to that there's nothing you can do, whether serving the poor in Calcutta for your whole life or being a serial killer, that will make God love you any more or any less than He loves you right now. That's a difficult concept for us to understand because we live in a world that judges. Let me say that again. This is when we understand the grace of God, we understand sin not to be a breaking of rules. This is for you personally, and everybody, listen, you understand sin not to be a breaking of rules, but a breaking of relationship with God. I'm going to say that again. When you understand grace, you understand sin to be not the breaking of rules, but the breaking of relationship with God. Do you understand that? Because when you understand that, then all of a sudden you can begin parenting your children in that way, where we're not necessarily concerned with breaking the rules. We're more concerned with you breaking the relationship. Okay? See, parents, we have to get ourselves right. Because a lot of us try to be grace-based parents, but we're still performance-based Christians or rules-based Christians. See, I didn't understand this until I was flying on a plane. And when you're flying on a plane, if there's a sudden loss of cabin pressure, oxygen masks drop down. And they tell you if you're traveling with a small child to put it on yourself first and then put it on a child. And the parent within me recoiled at that. I said, that's awful. I mean, shouldn't we put the mask on the child first? And the answer is, on no uncertain terms, no. Because if you black out while you're trying to put the mask on your child, you both go down. You put your own mask on first so that you can turn and serve your family from a position of strength, not weakness. And guys, if we don't understand the grace of God for ourselves, we will never be able to transmit that to our children. Okay? You cannot be a grace-based parent and be a rules-based Christian. All right? So we have to understand the grace of God for ourselves. Our parenting Christians, parenting becomes an overflow of our relationship with God. What God does for us, we turn and do for our children. That is exactly what grace-based parenting is. All right? So number 2 here. This is kind of getting practical. Have as few rules as possible. And I heard every kid in here go, yes! And you're waiting for a qualifier. I'm not going to make one. Have as few rules as possible. That's what a grace-based parent does. Look what Galatians 5:1 says. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. There is a reason why God gave us the 10 commandments, not the 50, not the 100, not the 150, not the 200. He gave us 10. Who here can name the 10 commandments in order? Let's see. Let's see if people in here, see if we can name the 10 commandments in order. And you joining us online, shout them out too. We'll hear you. Okay? All right. Commandment number 1, what is it? No other gods before me. Commandment number 2. No idols. Commandment number 3, somebody different. Commandment number 3. No, Lord's name in vain. Do not misuse. Sorry, I didn't say take the Lord's name in vain. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. All right. Number 4. What's today? Sabbath. All right. Very good. Number 5. I just read it earlier. Honor your mother and father that it may go well with you. Then come the next 5. What are they? Number 6. Murder. Don't murder. Number 7. Not commit adultery. Number 8. Not steal, exactly. Number 9, false witness or do not lie. Last one. What? Covet, absolutely. And I hate to say this, but wrong. Nope, that is not the 10 commandments because you left out the most important part. Everyone always does. Leave out the most important part of the 10 commandments. And what happens right before commandment number 1? This is what God says. He says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, who brought you out of the land of slavery. See, in the beginning of the 10 commandments, God doesn't give us 10 rules. He starts off with the relationship. Even in the Old Testament, God establishes the relationship with us before telling us what to do. He says, I am the Lord your God. You didn't know me. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know who brought you out of slavery, out of Egypt. You didn't know who it was that cared so much about you that I put the plagues on Egypt and I brought you out of part of the Red Sea. I did all of that for you to get you out of slavery, to let you know who I am. That's the first thing he says before he tells anybody what to do. That's a grace-based parent, because if I was a slave and God came down and brought me out of that misery and set me free to the promised land, and he says, hey, I'm the one who did this, I would say, it's amazing. He says, hey, I got 10 things for him. Whatever you say, man, because after what you did for me, there's nothing I'm not going to do. And so he establishes the relationship first, and then he gives us the 10 commandments. Author Ravi Zacharias said the reason we have 21,000 pages of laws on the books because we can't follow 10 statements etched in stone. See, I found this. The more rules you have in your house, the less grace there is, because the more rules you have, the less relationship you have. Now, I'm not saying don't have rules. I'm saying have as few as possible. See, guys, we need to tie every rule to a lesson and tie every consequence to a relationship. That's what a grace-based parent does. Okay, when your children mess up, and they will, and if you're a kid here, you will mess up. Let them see that isn't breaking a rule, it is breaking the relationship. Okay? This is revolutionary stuff, but let them see that you're not just breaking a rule, you're breaking the relationship. For example, probably the worst thing in the home that you can do is lie. Okay? That is the ultimate breaking of relationship when you lie. When somebody looks at you and tells you something that isn't right. Intentionally, not by mistake. See, this was a big one in my house growing up. Both in my house I grew up and the big house now. You don't lie. That is the ultimate disrespect to the person. And this is the way you operate in your relationships as well. If you got a good friend who looks at you and bald-faced lies to you, that relationship's going to be damaged, isn't it? Absolutely. Okay, so the consequence of lying must not just be being taken out to the shed or being grounded. It must be tied to a restoration of that broken relationship. See, parents, we need to start thinking along those lines. We start thinking about how do we get our children to value restoring that relationship. That's what a grace-based parent does. Okay? Do you see how this works? Grace-based parents are about the restoration of the broken relationship, not just punishment. See, but this has some inherent dangers. I have to realize this. Somebody, as I was explaining this concept, somebody brought up their mom. And their mom was a toxic, manipulative person who did this very thing. She tied everything to restoring the relationship. But it wasn't restoring the relationship. Whenever this person was telling me, whenever I messed up, I basically became my mom's virtual slave for the next 5 years because she would always bring it back up and bring it back up and bring it back up. And she would use that to get me to do whatever she wanted me to do. She was toxic and manipulative. And that's why we have to understand the grace of God first before we do this, because a toxic, manipulative person will use this to turn you into a slave, always living in guilt. Do you understand what I'm saying? That is not what I am saying here. Parents, if you are a manipulative, toxic person, first of all, repent. Second of all, never use this until you get yourself right with God. All right? And if you grew up under a legalistic, manipulative person or currently dealing with one, you know how toxic this is. And if you don't understand the grace of God and don't live under it, you'll destroy this concept for your kids and the people around you. But here's the ultimate goal of a grace-based parent. And if I had just one thing to tell every Christian parent, every parent in America, this is what I would say. I would say this. The goal of grace parenting is making disciples. That's it. Making disciples. Look what Ephesians 6:4 says. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. This is something that a lot of Christian parents don't get, and a lot of us have never gotten it. I know this. I was in youth ministry for 9 years, been a pastor for 12 years, and I'm astounded at what comes out of so-called Christian homes. Children that are incapable of articulating even the basic parts of the Christian faith. Children who are far more influenced by and shaped by media and by pop culture and celebrities than they are by the Word of God. My parents, you have all kinds of pressures and stresses on you. I know. I've been a parent for 21 years. You have to raise your kids. You have to know what they're watching online. Got to worry about social media apps. Got to worry about cyberbullying. Got to worry about mental health. And worry about friends they hang out with, what career path they're on. Got to figure out, worry about teaching them to drive responsibly. Boy, that's a fun one. Who they will date, who they will marry. There's a constant thing going on, and I am not going to burden you with something else. But here's the question I want to ask you all. You know what's missing in all of that? Will any of those things matter in 100 years? Will a social media app, what they watch on TV, who they hang out with, any of that matter in 100 years? No. Here's one thing that will matter in 100 years, in 1,000, in 1,000,000, and for all eternity, is their relationship with Jesus Christ. That is your primary responsibility, parents. That is. Not schoolwork, as important as that is. Not sports performance, as important as that is. It's whether or not they have lives surrendered to the lordship of Jesus Christ. That is the only major thing that's going to matter in 100 years. John Eldredge said this: teach a man a rule, and you'll help him solve a problem. Teach him to walk with God, and you'll help him solve the rest of his life. Isn't that awesome? That's good stuff right there. I'm going to read that again. Teach a man a rule, you help him solve a problem. Teach him to walk with God, and you help him solve the rest of his life. Now, many parents know the heartbreak of adult children that have walked away from the faith. Many of us in this room and online know this. Even bringing our children up as disciples and doing the best we can is no guarantee they're going to walk with Jesus. They all have to make that decision for themselves, and I pray that they will. But many parents wake up one day and realize their children are simply more honest reflections of themselves. They have the same priorities, same goals, same values, same everything. It's just they don't have the faith facade that their parents did. Really. They prioritize the exact same things their parents do: work, school, sports, leisure, career, comfort. They're just more honest in their downplaying of the importance of faith than their parents are. See, our greatest fear, parents, shouldn't be of raising children that are failures. Our greatest fear, parents, should be of raising children that succeed in things that just don't matter. That should be our greatest fear and concern as parents. Not that we raise people that are not successful in the world's eyes. It's just that we raise people that are successful in things that just don't matter. Jesus asked the question himself in Matthew chapter 16, verse 26. What good is it to gain the whole world and yet forfeit your very soul? That's a good question. Are we raising children that are excellent in things that don't matter? I'm going to speak to the teenagers. 1/4 of the people in this church are under the age of 18. I don't know if you know that or not. Are you all going to be excellent in something that doesn't matter? Or are you going to be excellent in something that matters for eternity? And that is your relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm going to invite the band to come on back up. Grace-based parents prioritize bringing their children up in the faith and the training and instruction of the Lord. That's what the Bible says. Interestingly enough, Ephesians 6:4 doesn't say pastors, does it? It doesn't say pastors don't exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training instruction of the Lord. They don't say that. It doesn't say mothers. It doesn't say teachers. It doesn't say politicians. It says fathers. Do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And for the mothers out there, if there's no father there doing that job, I know that you're going to do the best that you can. But men, it is our job to bring our children, our sons and our daughters, up in the instruction of the Lord. That's it. That is the only thing that's going to matter in 100 years or 1,000 years. So I'm going to paraphrase John Eldredge's quote. I'm going to say this: teach our children a rule, and we help them solve a problem. Teach our children to walk with God, and we help them solve the rest of their lives. Far more concerned with breaking relationship than breaking rules. We are grace-based parents. We are people that take the grace of God that He has given us, our understanding that sin is not so much breaking a rule as breaking a relationship with God, and we turn and we parent the same way. That's what a grace-based parent is, and I want to pray that you move that grace of God into your home. Move it into your home and watch Jesus produce a harvest of righteousness and peace in your homes and in your children. If you need prayer, if you need to discuss this, if you need help, one of my favorite things in the world to do is help families thrive. I love marriage. I love kids. I love being a parent. Contact us, reach out. And you all online as well. Send us an email, send us a text. Let us help you. There are people in this church that are excellent parents, that are excellent at being married. Let's get you guys together and learn from them. If you're struggling with this concept, we want there to be grace-based marriage and grace-based parents in this church, because this is the way to do things the best way. All right, I want to invite you to